I think that the concept of governance as opposed to government, as opposed to government agency or government organization, on the one hand suggests a different unit of analysis that's the focus of a discussion about public value. And as you could go from a particular government organization that had a mission in a changing environment, and we can talk about the use of public value as a way of helping the organization move from its current position to an improved position for a particular organization. We could also talk about the creation of a new governance structure and process, which would be designed to help create a capacity to act across the boundaries of different organizations in different sectors to solve particular problems. And I think that's an important part of the world we're living in right at the moment. And it's a non-trivial question to figure out how to construct these collaborative enterprises for the creation of public value and make sure that they work. But that's above the level of the organization. And then the other part that gets evoked when you start talking about governance is not only the question of how to take assets that are available and deploy them to accomplish a result, but also how to deliberate within a particular jurisdiction about what results are worth going after or what particular pieces of public value are worth trying to develop. And that last piece on governance and governing mechanisms and public value governance and governing mechanisms goes to the political side, and it raises the question of whether we could have a dialogue among citizens who were trying to think not only about their own interests but the interests of others, gathered together in a deliberative process that would create a decision that was a more reliable expression of what individual citizens wanted for themselves and for other citizens, and in making of that decision prepared themselves to do the work that was to do the work and suffer the necessary indignities that would be required to achieve the desired result. So I think there's a public value take, if you will, on each of the ideas of strategic positioning of organizations, the construction of collaborative governance arrangements for dealing with cross-cutting problems, and with the creation of a capacity for civic and public deliberation about what would be worth producing with government assets. I think the new public management suffered from the fact that it was pretty individualistic, that it thought it borrowed from the liberal tradition the idea that the only arbiter of value was an individual, and then reached out for the analogy with the market and thought that the purpose of government was to satisfy customers. And I think that just completely misunderstood the nature of government and politics, and that in government and politics, the arbiter of value is a collective. And so the construction of that collective arbiter of value that could say not just what individuals wanted, but what all of us individuals thinking and acting like citizens together might want for ourselves and one another, all right, was just completely missing from the new public management at some level. And yet it's fundamental to democratic politics and democratic governance. So I think the public value idea is a strong critique of the, quote, new public management. With respect to bureaucracy and network governance, I think what if what's at issue there is on the question of networks, whether productive capacity for achieving public goals is distributed across different organizations located in different sectors, right? I would say that the public value framework is perfectly in line with that, and gets complicated a little bit because it's a little less clear what the authorizing environment for a network is as opposed to a single organization. But in terms of the necessary function of building legitimacy and support for the functioning of a whole network, it identifies a particularly demanding political problem on the side of managing networks. So, for example, a lot of my early career was spent working for people who were called drug czars, and they were responsible for organizing a state or a national level response to dangerous drugs. And they were given that title, but they didn't have any authority and money. And yet what they had to do was to try to assemble and organize and motivate a complex production system that was distributed across enforcement activities and treatment activities and other forms of prevention activities. And so that was a natural way to, so collaborative governance is just another object to be strategically managed, and the strategic triangle turns out to be a way to do that. And the last question on bureaucracy, I think that one of the things that public value does, paradoxically, is that it reminds people that one of the virtues of bureaucracy was that it guaranteed a consistent treatment among individuals. And whether that was a just treatment or not, it was at least fair in the sense that like cases were treated alike. And it was predictable in the sense that people knew what they were going to get, and that those were both consistent with a one idea of justice and fairness, all right? But I think that bureaucracy also had the problem that it got too rigid, and it lost its ability to connect up its activities with the consequences, both for individuals and for the larger society. And so, and I think that the concept of public value was designed to challenge the concept of bureaucracy, both in terms of how responsive it could be, how innovative it could be, how focused on results as opposed to process it could become. So I think if I were to try to locate the idea of public value in those three different areas, it's hostile to the new public management, it's friendly with the collaborative networks, and it understands the virtues of bureaucracy but wants to challenge the bureaucracy to become more responsive and more effective. The central question there is whether how we understand the meanings of the word efficiency and productivity, and with respect to what particular ends. Now, efficiency usually refers to a relationship between cost on the one hand and the value of some output on the other. And productivity refers to pretty much the same thing, which is cost per unit of productive activity. So in both cases, we're looking at a concept that relates the cost of an activity to the value of the output. What often happens, though, is that people begin thinking about those outputs in terms of particular transactions that occur in an organization. And those transactions are not value in public organizations for the most part. The values lie further down a causal mechanism where the outputs involve transactions with clients that causes them to change in a way that achieves the desired social outcomes. So if you stretched out the idea of efficiency to include cost per unit of value created with respect to outcomes, which would sometimes be described as cost effectiveness, or productivity in terms of cost, not in terms of the production of an output, but again in terms of the ultimate goal that we were after, then there'd be no tension between the ideas of efficiency and productivity. It's only when the concepts of efficiency and productivity get narrowly focused on the particular outputs of an organization without worrying about the longer-term, larger consequences of that, where the value is really created, that there's a tension. Well, I think that money is, as we've talked, is one of the assets that you use to alter people's social conditions. And one of the ways to do it is to shift money from one person to another and improve the welfare of the person who got the money that you just gave to them. So I wouldn't ever leave money out of discussion of public value. But the question, I'm not exactly what is meant by the sort of a new paradigm of economics or something like that. But I think it's important to accept and understand that people are terribly interested and concerned about the production of justice and the way in which state authority is being used, and to make sure that when we're talking about the value of things that is being produced in the government, we talk about not only how money is being used and how efficiently and effectively, but also how authority is being used and how efficiently and effectively, but also how fairly and justly it's being used to accomplish particular purposes, right? And I want to always draw attention to the fact that government depends, maybe everything in society depends on what I might call public spirit, but government maybe in particular depends on what could be called public spirit. And what I mean by that is the willingness of people to contribute to the welfare of others or to accept inconveniences that fall on them as part of the effort to help others as things that are acceptable and appropriate for living together in a larger society. So if the question is there something beyond money that's important, the answer is you bet. And what beyond money that's important is a sense of common purpose and an ideal of justice and a variety of other things that go into making our lives worth living. Well, I'd start with getting familiar with the strategic triangle and trying it out and seeing what it shows them, whether it suggests anything important for them that they hadn't previously seen. And if that works for them, then I can suggest a very long reading list of ways that they might increase the breadth and depth of their sophistication in the use of these concepts. But I think an awful lot of the value comes from being purposeful, being imaginative in the pursuit of purposes, and using the strategic triangle as best you can to diagnose the particular opportunities of the situation you're in. Public value doesn't get you anywhere until you start using it to dig out the possibilities of your particular concrete situation and your position within that. And it's practice in doing that over and over again that would make the idea most valuable. There's a wonderful account by Levi-Strauss of in The Savage Mind of a person he calls the bricoleur, and the bricoleur is a craftsman. And what Levi-Strauss describes is that the bricoleur has in his pockets a set of tools, but he's also used that set of tools over a large number of projects. And so what Strauss observes is that the first project he does has the marks of the tool as well as the actual conditions, right? That there was sort of a dialogue between the task and the tool, and in the course of that, the tool left its imprint on what could get produced as well as the inherent nature of the problem itself. But he also says then the tool changed because the tool actually was modified in the course of executing the project. You found a new use for the tool, you found out particular ways in which it was helpful and harmful, et cetera. And so not only did the project bear the mark of the tool, but the tool bore the mark of the project. And if you did that over a large number of projects, right, the tool would gradually get more and more elaborate and more sophisticated, and the difficulty of fitting the tool to the actual conditions that you were seeing in front of you would get to be less because the tool would be more flexible, right? And so I think the strategic triangle is a little bit like that, that I can teach you the basics in about 5 minutes, and then you can spend your entire lifetime figuring out how to use it with greater fluency and greater effect. And so I hope that's what you'll start on right away.